from today's session, right, like we are going to deal with Excel operations and workbook operations and the data tables. So I know like Saikan had already taken the data table session, but still I will continue with the data table and whatever is required. And before we go for any other things, right, first let us understand what is Excel and workbook. So what are these two and what actually the difference between these two? Anyone, guys? What is the difference between the Excel and a workbook?
So we have to install Excel in our system, but that not in the case with the workbook.
That is the difference between Excel activities and the workbook activities. But my question is completely different. What is the difference between Excel and a workbook? Contains multiple workbooks? No, it is not correct. Workbook is a data file.
Or I can say basically a workbook is an Excel file, right, that contains multiple worksheet.
No, workbook is a data file. Contains multiple data sheets and with the extension of .xlsx. Excel is an application to access data files of the format .xlsx, .xls, .csv, .lsm. So like there are other files as well. So Excel is an application provided by Microsoft suite to access the data file. See, whatever we have, the .xlsx files, right, that we call it as a workbook. And this workbook will be accessed with the Excel. And the Excel file is not a data file. Excel is just an application. And if you Google something, see Google Sheets, okay, Zoho Sheets, LibreOffice, WPS Office spreadsheets. If you see any of these application names, right, even these will be used to open your spreadsheet, but nowhere you will find the name of Excel. We got habituated to the Excel, calling that XLSX file as Excel file because we are every system we are having Microsoft Excel application installed, and we are using that to start with, like to read the data or to interact with your data file. That is the reason for which like we got habituated to Excel. But the sheet is like the file whatever we have is not an Excel file. It is a data file, and Excel is an application which we will be using to access that data file. If you see WPS Office spreadsheets, right, even this will be used to open your Excel files, like data files, workbooks, right? But here you will not find Excel. So if you see, right, only the Microsoft Office is having Excel, and the rest of the file applications will be used to open it, but nothing will be considered as an Excel. Clear? Excel is just an application. It's not anything. That is the basic difference between the Excel and a workbook. Okay. Excel activities versus workbook activities.
So it means basically workbook is a part of Excel, right? Path?
Workbook can be accessed through the Excel, and we have different applications also to access your workbook. It is not part of Excel. Workbook is your file where you are storing your data, and Excel is an application to access your workbook. See, with the Excel, you can access the workbook, and also you can access the CSV files. See, even you can open your CSV files also, right, with the help of Excel, but it is not an Excel file. It's not a workbook. Excel is an application to open these type of files: XLSX, XLS, CSV, XLSM, whatever like table content files we have, right? So we will be using this Excel as an application to open them. But the workbook is a file. Got it?
Yeah, Path, yeah.
So that's where the answer which you gave previously, for Excel, we need to have an application installed. For workbook, it is not required, because Excel activities are like to interact with your Excel application. So you need to have your Excel to be installed. Whereas workbook activities are directly dealing with your file systems. So it doesn't require any application to be installed. It is like integratable or a backend integration with your workbook files. So the first difference, what we can state, see, we will see the differences also, but these are the questions which will be asked when you are dealing with Excel automation. Okay. So for Excel application, Excel activities, Microsoft Excel to be installed and need to be licensed. So you need to have a license also. Whereas for workbook activities, Excel application not necessary to be installed. Okay, which means for Excel activities, we need to have a Microsoft Excel application to be installed, and also it needs to be licensed. You need to acquire the license of Microsoft Excel as well, Office as well, in order to deal with your Excel applications or to interact with your Excel applications. But for workbook, the Microsoft Excel application not necessary to be installed. Let us suppose you have only the reading and writing of the data into an Excel file, and you are not viewing it or you are not doing any other operations, and you will be sending it on over an email to the end user. Then I don't want to spend my money on Excel license, right? See, I'm not using Excel full-fledged, then why should I spend a license on top of it? Because it is not only with the Excel, right? We need to get licensed for all the applications which is part of your Office suite or O365, right? So if you see here, let me go to all apps. So we have Excel. We have, let me go here. You have PowerPoint, Publisher. You'll be having Word, and you'll be having Outlook. Look, OneNote. So you need to pay for each and every license. You need to get all the licenses together because it's a part of your O365, right? So I don't want to spend the money. on my robot machine because I'm not full-fledgedly using it. So we can leverage these workbook activities in order to write or read a data from XLSX or a workbook. Okay, this is one difference. And the other difference is Excel activities can interact with .xlsx, .xls, .csv, .xlsm. So we have many more, like where more applications where we can open the files, not applications, we can say more file format where we can open the files with the help of Excel application. But workbook activities can interact only with .xlsx. It cannot interact with any other data file, extension file. It will not work for XLS, XLSM. XLSM is nothing but the macro file, and will come there as well. Okay, this is the second difference between the workbook and Excel. If you see right here, you have the limitation on Excel activities. Here you have a limitation on workbook activities. And the other thing is using Excel activities, we can perform more actions than reading and writing the data, which means we can perform all the actions what we can perform through Excel application. With workbook activities, we can perform only reading and writing the data. So we have one more limitation on top of workbook activities. Other than this licensing, right, we don't have any other limitations with the Excel application. But the workbook, we have a lot of limitations. We can deal with macros. We can execute VBA. See nothing but Visual Basic for application. Using Excel application activities, which we cannot perform using workbook activities. So these are the differences. If anyone asks you a question that like what is the difference between Excel activities and the workbook activities, these are the answers. And if someone asks much more deep dive and asks the difference between the Excel and workbook, there might be a chance when we are saying this, right? Then they'll ask like what is the difference between this, and we can even give this before we start with this question. So it will be always good, right? Like when we are trying to explain the difference between the activities, it would be better if we give the explanation of Excel and the workbook. So this is much more frequently asked questions. Okay. before we jump into the coding like studio, so these points we just need to keep in our mind, and now we will start with that. Go with workbook and data table. So let me go with the classic design, because Excel will have both classic and modern. I never worked with the modern design, but for sure, like by before end of the course, right, I'll try to have a session on modern design of Excel as well. Okay. So let me come here under application integrations, Excel. So here are the Excel activities we have. Okay. See, we will not be covering all these details. If you see the names itself, right? The names itself is going to give you what we can say, the picture of what actually they are trying to do, and we will cover majority of the activities which we generally use, and based on the requirement, as and when required, right, we are going to have that such a discussion. And you can play with these activities like insert or delete rows. If you drag and drop this, right, it will be asking like number of rows to be deleted, at from which position you want to delete, from which sheet you want to delete. So these activities you can just give a try based on these things. And in case if you are facing any issues, right, you can come up and ask me, because we have a lot of activities. It is very hard to cover each and every activity, and we will cover majority of the activities which are required. Okay. And most commonly used activities or much more required activities, used activities is read range, write range, Excel, read range, workbook, write range, workbook, execute macro, execute DBA. So these are the most commonly used activities in any of our processes. Of course, you'll have read cell and write cell also as part of the workbook and Excel, that we will cover. Anyhow, it doesn't make much difference. Okay, so these are most commonly used activities. Okay, and before we start with these activities, right, just let me give you a quick background of data table. Though we are not completely getting much more deeper into it, as part of this excellent workbook itself, we are going to cover some of the data table as well. But so what actually the data table? Data table is an object which is holding the tabular data, which means rows and columns, which is similar to a tabular content we have in an Excel spreadsheet. Even in the Excel also, we will be having a tabular content data, right? Like rows and columns. So that we call it as a data table when it comes to the programmatic implementation. And the data table, we call data table in C#, VB, UiPath, and all the Microsoft related programming and products. But when it comes to the Python, it will be data frames. So the name may change a bit, but end of the story, it's a tabular content data. And for us, it is a data table. Of course, here also we will be having data frame. Data frame is nothing but the collection or a list of data tables. This we will get to know when we are implementing a project, like with the help of document understanding. There we will be getting this data frame, but now we just need to think of data table only. Okay. Let me reduce the font of this. Okay. So this is the data table. And why I gave the introduction to this is like to use a read range or write range, right? We need to have a data table. Let us come here. And let us pull out the write range and write range activities. Let us do one thing. Let us take a read range activity, not the write. Read range workbook. Range. If you see the difference between these two activities, this is related to the Excel activity and this is related to the workbook activity. If you see this, right, this is having a file path option. We need to give the workbook file path, but here we don't have the file path because this will come under the Excel application scope activity. We will be giving, see here it is saying the workbook path, which means like even here also we are giving it. Let me put this here, and this notification went off. Here we need to provide the workbook path, and here we are providing the sheet. Here we are providing the range. So we have the sheet and range here, and the workbook path here. The workbook path will go with this container Excel application scope, which means you already provided the path, and you're asking that to open in your Excel application and perform the operations. Okay. Let me do one thing. Let me create a file under. What is your location?
Bangalore.
See? Satish?
Mumbai.
Sorry?
Mumbai.
Mumbai. Ashok?
Hyderabad.
So we have the data of whoever is there here, right? And this is my tabular data we have. So here we need to have, and here also we need to provide the X. And here automatically we have the sheet name, and we can have it here. Okay, so both will work now. Let us do one thing. Let us create a data table, the output variable for this. Control K, BP, Excel workbook data. Let us do one thing here. Control K, BP, Excel data. And now let me run this flow. And before I am running, right, I have a data table and I don't know how to look into that data table. So we'll be using output data table activity. Convert the data table into a string values with comma as delimiter. Delimiter in the sense comma separated column values. Let us how we will come to know that this activity needs to be used. See, sometimes we may or may not aware, right? So what I generally do is I'll just go to search for data table. Okay, and here if I go one after the other, add data column, which means like I need to add a column to a data table, add data row to add a row, build a data table, which means, see, if you just hover the mouse, it is saying that creates a data table based on a schema which we are going to provide. Clear data table clears the specific data table of all the data in, which means like all the data whatever you have in a table will be cleared off. Filter data table filters a data table by specifying a conditions. So I don't need this. For each row, executes an action once for each row in the data table. So which means it is looping through all the rows of the data, generates a data table. It will create a data table from a structured data. Get row item, row variable, which means it gets a value from a data row according to a specific column, which means like it will return you a cell value. So we will see this. All these activities we will see. So I'm just giving a overview like how we can identify which activity needs to be used for converting a table into a text. This combines rows from two different data tables. Search for a value. It will merges two different data tables. Output data table writes a data table to a string using CSV format. CSV format is nothing but comma separated values. So I want this DT workbook data, and we will be having an output of string workbook data, and here we will be having again output data table. Excel properties, control the string data. Okay. So if you see, right, here we kept it as an empty, here we kept it as double quotes. Either we can mark it as an empty or we can just give a double quote. So it's up to us how we want to give. And now let us write this into a log message. Info string workbook data. And I'll just put a message box here. And then we'll start with our Excel. Okay. And if you see the Excel application properties, so we have, in case if you have a password, we can give a password, like some files will be password protected, to read the data. We can provide the password and we can mark it as read only, which means like we cannot write the data, and save changes. Automatically saves the changes of a workbook without using save workbook activity. In case if you uncheck this, you need to use save workbook activities separately. And we have an output which is a workbook object, and we will see like how we can utilize this workbook object. And we can use this, like we already used an Excel application scope here, and we have taken that as a workbook object. And in case if you are using this Excel application scope any other place, we can use this workbook object as an existing workbook. This accepts the workbook application object type. Okay, and let us create an workbook object, workbook Excel. Okay? We have created a workbook Excel, and we'll see like how we can utilize this object in the later stage. Let us come to the variable. See here, it is a workbook application. Okay, so it is visible, right? Let us run this. Workbook action is complete. Let us come to the output. So whatever we have created in our Excel, we could able to get that information here. Okay. Now let me click on OK. And if you observe the screen properly, Excel file icon will come here next to this. See that Excel file application icon came and it was went off. Let me expand this. So the data is same. Where is this? Oops, we didn't wrote anything here. Log message. The data. And after writing the data, let me put a message box also, just to give us a very clear picture that whether the Excel is opening or not. Workbook operation is completed. Click on OK. See, the Excel is kept open. Till the time the Excel application scope ends, because we kept the message box inside of our Excel application scope. Till that time, this will be kept open and the operations will be performed. So we have wrote the second time also. And if you see, right, all the data was retrieved irrespective. Okay. Click on OK. Now the Excel application is got closed. And if you see here, right, we are reading from the A1 cell, which means like name, location and all. Okay. And now we will not change any of the range and anything. And we will just uncheck two checkboxes, one checkbox in each. Add headers. Let me uncheck this. Okay. Uncheck this. And let us, even I think still we will get the same names, but that we will see in the later stage. It may not give us a very clear picture what actually happening. See here, the column 0, column 1 got added because I said like I don't have headers in the existing table, which means like the name and location. So that is also considered as a data. That's why column 0, column 1 got added. Click on OK. Even in the Excel also. So the behavior of reading and writing of the data is same. Unless and until if you have a different data type values in your Excel, in such scenarios, you may face some challenges when you're dealing with workbook, because workbook will not have any different data types or any formatting things. Only the Excel application will have this formatting and all these things. So such as scenarios, you may need to deal with this. So you have preserve format here. Yeah, here also you have. Okay, now we will see, like probably when you are dealing with the hyperlinks and the datetime formats and the numbers, right? Datetime formats especially, you may face issues with the workbook. It will read in a different way. So now we kept everything normal, right? So here what I want to do is I'll put A2. Okay. Let me keep this add headers common. And here what I want to do is I want to use B1. Here I just kept only A2 and here I just kept B1. Excel workbook data was reading is done, which means it is, let me click on OK here. So now the Excel application is got off. B1, which means like it is reading from here. It ignored the A cell, A complete A column, because we said that like my range is starting from B1. Okay. And let me go to the output. Here if you see, right, it started from A2. The name and location, whatever was supposed to come, was not coming. Which means like we can specify the range from which cell you want to read. And now there will be a question which is coming up. This is A1 colon B2. What data it is going to read? Let me just delete it because there is no difference between the workbook and the Excel in terms of reading other than using of Excel application, right? Agree, everyone? Then opening of your Excel and using of your Excel application. Other than that, there is no difference between the workbook and Excel. But we have one more difference which I missed out to explain. For right range, that we will write later. Once we experience it practically, then we will write that difference. Okay, for now, let us consider only that is the only difference, and let us come here. In case if I'm saying that A1 to B2, what data I'm going to get from here? What data I'm going to get? The whole data? No, I'll be getting from A1 to B2. Only these two row values will be reflected, and first will be considered as column. So I'll be having only one row data value. Let me run this. I kept it as A1 to B2. Run the file. Let us see what it wrote in the output. See here, I got only one row data, and the above one is column names. Click on it. Which means we can specify start and end range, and also we can specify start cell from which the data needs to be read. And if we completely left it blank, it will read the whole data. Which means it is calculating how many rows does it have, and from the starting to end. And the last data it is calculating, and based on that, it is taking the data. See, now we have in this way, right? Let us keep it as it is. Let me run this workflow. Okay. And let me open it. You see, right? Recovering. It is saying that like to recover the previous whatever we have. So every time I don't want to click on close and see this. So let me close this. So what I will do is, before I close, I'll use save workbook activity. Run the file. Click on OK. See that. Let us suppose I don't know the sheet names what I have, but I know that I am having the data in my first sheet of my workbook. So what we can do is, see, here is the workbook, right? So we can use WB, the object, workbook object dot get sheets. I am not getting it. Get sheets, I can put 0. 0 is the index. The workbook dot get sheets is going to return you the list of string values, array of string values, you can say, which is of sheet names. So this will be my first sheet. So whatever we have a data here, right? If in case if it is printing the same data, then my syntax is correct. Let me run this. Here. Which means in case if I don't know the sheet names, and if I'm sure about some keyword what I have in the sheet, or some index which I know, then I can use this workbook object to get the sheet names. And do we have any other? Yes, we have get sheet workbook sheets. Click on this and we can just put 0, and the output you can say sheet name, and we can use that variable sheet name here. So in case if you doesn't know the sheet name, right, in that case you cannot use your workbook activities. For that you need to know the sheet name for sure, and here you just need to use your get workbook sheet activity in case if you know the index properly. If not, you need to loop through each and every sheet name, and inside of the sheet name, in case if you have a keyword, you can use workbook dot get sheets to get list of your sheet names, and based on some keyword we can use that. So we will see that as well. First let us run this. Even we should be making sure that even this is also working. So I got the same data, which means my get workbook sheet also working. And let me do one thing. I'll duplicate this sheet, copy, create a copy. I got sheet 1 to sheet 1. And here I'll say data sheet. I want to have data from a sheet, okay, where I have data as a keyword. And let me do one thing. Let me delete this. Delete. Because I'm keeping range A1 to B2, right? So here I'll be getting Akash and Bangalore. Here I should get Sri and Hyderabad. Correct, guys? And let me go here. Here, what I need to do is for each, I need to loop for each workbook Excel dot get sheets. I have the sheet name dot contains. Then read the range and break the loop. I'm saying is, if I have the sheet looping to each sheet name, whatever I have, and in case if it is having data, then read the range and then break. So now I shouldn't get this Akash. I should get 3. Let us run the file. So we can do in this way. And one more important question we generally get from here, right? To get sheets from an workbook, Or the question can be in the different way. I have an workbook and I don't know what is the sheet name, and I know I will have data in my first sheet. How can I read the data? So this can be your question. Your answer should be using workbook activities. We cannot read the data if we are not sure about sheet name. But we can use the Excel activities to read get the sheet names by index in both ways. Using get sheet name activity by passing index and using the activity inside Excel application scope. Okay. This is one way, and the other way is we can use can create an output object of workbook application type or Excel application of activity, and we can use workbook object dot get sheets method to get the list of sheets available in an workbook, and we can access with the help of index. So this should be our answer. And just so I'm not sure like how many of you might have tried in attending UiPath interviews, either of I don't know, but if you anyone knows that like attended like this question might be asked somewhere. Did anyone came across this question? So this question will be asked. This is one of the scenario-based questions they generally ask. So this is one of the question which they will ask. Okay. So can we write one more point here? The difference between the workbook and workbook activities. Let us not write this. Let us not put this. It will create some chance to the interviewer to ask more questions. This is one of the questions which can be asked, and this is how we access it. Okay. Let us do one. write a log message here. Don't want to break. I want to show you all the sheet names it is printing or not. I'm not breaking it, right? Oh, oops. I'm putting a condition. Come out of this. Run this. I got both the sheet names. Let us do one thing. Close this. Oh. Now, if you see, right, like, let me disable this. We comment this. This will not be executed if we comment this out. Run the flow. Open, right? I'm getting this document recovery because it is safe closing is not happening. So in such a scenarios, what we can do is we can use close workbook activity for a safe close of this Excel application, and the instance will not be holded. In case if the instance is holded, right, then that will create a problem for you to write the data, because if the file is already kept open in the background, and again if you try to open it, then that will help you to like use it as a read only. So you need to use this close workbook in order to safe close the workbook activity. Okay. And let me show you one thing. Let me keep this open and let me run this file. So we got the data. Okay. What I will do is I'll keep that open. I'll use the workbook read range activity. Let me run this. This is kept open, right? Let me open this. Let me run this. I'm getting this read range error because if you kept this file open, right, your workbook activities will throw an error if you try to read the data. But your Excel activities will not throw any error. Let me delete this and run the flow. It is not throwing any error. The reason is your Excel application, in case if file is already in use, your Excel application will open that as a read-only mode. So the reading of the data from an Excel will be possible. So the Excel application activity read range will work, but the workbook read range will not work if the file is already kept open. If file is already open, Excel read range read the data from Excel file, but workbook read range will throw an error saying the file is already in use. But for write range, both Excel and workbook will throw an error. But for read range, it will happen in this way. So the question can be in a different way as well for this. The question can be, let me copy this. The question can be in this way again. we have an Excel file kept open, and I use Excel read range and workbook read range. I executed both the sequences. Then what will happen? So it can be asked in this way. Got it, guys? Here. Okay. Just we'll break for 10 minutes and then we'll settle back. So to read the data from particular cell, right? Let me go here. Read cell. Even for workbook also you have read cell. So here I'll just provide V2, and the output is cell value result. I can use my message box. Let me close this out and run this file. Bangalore, which is there in the V2 sheet 1. That's it.
Okay.
So we have read cell, write cell. In case if you want to specifically write into some cell, right, you have write cell activity. You can even give your formulas as well if you want. For formulas, you just need to put equal to. Suppose, let us do one thing. Under the sheet 1, I'll say equal to concat, comma, Akash band. Let me put one more space, okay? And I can put even comma in between. So now I have this. My formula, right? Here I don't have anything now. I'm closing it, and I want to write this value, this formula here. Okay, here I have double quotes. I just need to put one more. We have double quote is the escape sequence for the double quote. In case if you want to have a double quote inside your string, then you just need to add one more double quote. Okay. And I want to write this in the C2 cell, right? Correct. And I want to read from the value from the C2. Okay. Let us run this and see. See here, the formula was kept and it is reading the value. Okay. And this right cell formula even applicable to the workbook also. I never tried, but we just need to check. But see, reading and writing of the data can happen with the workbook activities. Other than that, let us do one. I'm just removing this. To remove this, we'll have go with the autofill range. Okay, and I need to give the source range, which is nothing but C2. Let us see what actually it is expected. Source range C2, which is my range, and the destination range to autofill from C3 to C6. C2. Okay. Let us see if this is happening or not. I use the autofill range at only one in my project. There might be some issue I'm facing here, right? So let me go. It is saying that autofill method of range plus. Uh-huh. Go here. So generally, what I'll do is I'll go to Google. The range activity to get the last row. The range is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, I got it. Now, what we need to do is we need to say C2 because we have the last value in the C2. From C2 to C6, the same value needs to be filled. Now it went perfect. Let us open this and see. So this formula was autofill. Instead of writing cell by cell and looping through each other, we can directly use this autofill range. When you want to drag, see, generally we will be dragging, right? 1, 2, and if I drag here, if I drag in this way, right? I'm getting these numbers. So let us close this. What I'll do is I'll just put C2 to C3 as a range, and from C3 to C6 as autofill. Okay. D2 to D3 as a range, and have D3 to D6. Let us run this file. D2 to D6. So, however, we are dragging, right? So let us do one thing. Let us close, delete this. I'll tell you the reason why. Here we selected this and we are dragging it in this way, which means like the range is this, and from here to here we want to fill the data. And but here in for the incremental we selected these two, and from here we are dragging it. So which means this is my source range, and from here to here I want the range fill up. This is how we can use this autofill range. And this is not available with the workbook. This is available only with the Excel, because these operations we can do only in the Excel. Okay. Here, guys. Now, let us go for some right range. Okay. And for that, what I want to do is I want to autofill this data, and I want to read data from here, the whole data. Okay. No, I want to read only this data, and I want to write it into some new sheet. So here my requirement is I need to autofill this, and then I need to read from A1 to C2, and then I need to write this data into a new sheet. So for that, we will be using read range. So I want to read from A1 to C2. And before that, I want to autofill the range. The destination is C2 to C6. And then I want to write this data. For that, we will be using write range, and it will be from the A1 cell, and the sheet 1, instead of sheet 1, we will say sheet 3. And whatever data we are getting, we will be writing into that DT Excel data. We will be using DT Excel data. Okay, let us run this. If I kept it open, right, it will throw an error when it is writing the data. Let us see that, and then we will go for it. Wrote the data. Oh, because it is on the same machine. In case if you are having that in a different location, then it is going to be a problem. See, if you see here, right, this autofill was happened, and here we read the data, and it is writing only the data. The columns are not available. What might be the reason? Reason is here we need to check this add headers checkbox. And now let us close this, and let me run this again. Let's open this. See here. Now we got the columns also. And here we are getting the values, not the formulas. Here we have the formula. Okay. Now we got this data. And now what my requirement is, I already have this data, I know, and I'm deleting it. And I want this data to be written here from here. And I don't want to have any columns. How we can do that? We can use the read range. And here I want to write from A3 cell. So here I can say A3, and I don't want headers. Uncheck it. And here I want to read all the data, right? Guys. So from sheet 1, I'm reading all the data, and I'm writing from A3, and I'm ignoring the column names. Let us close this and run the file. Open it up. So now I got the data, right? Without the column names. But let us consider in this. I don't know till what rows the data is there. And even I don't want to get the last row number as well. I don't want to get that as well. Okay. I don't want to see how many rows I have, but I want to write from here. So for that, instead of write range, right, I'll be using append range. Under sheet 3, I'll just put the data table. And here I'm not going to specify the range. We don't have anything called as range because it will write from the next available row. Append range is going to write from the next available or next empty row. Let me run this file. See here, I got this data. And their add headers or ignore headers, this will not be available. So whatever the row data you have from the next available empty row, you will be writing the data with the help of append range. Got it? And what will happen? See, I already have this data. I already have this data, and I am using write range, not the append range. And from the A1 GT Excel, and I'm checking the add headers. I'm not using the append range. So what it will do? Let us run this. The existing row was gone in the sheet 3. Oops, sorry, I'm writing in sheet 1. Okay, let me go for the sheet 3. So we have one row. Let's run this. So in the sheet 3, existing data is gone and the new data override the existing data. So let us put the question here. I already have a data in an Excel file and used to write some data using write range. What will happen? New data will override existing data. Is this statement good enough, guys? Is this statement good enough? Let me do one thing. I have this much data, right? And here, what I want to do is, I'll just put only one row. Maybe. Good answer. So I have only one row, and I'll use the same write range here. And what will happen? Let me open this again. Under the sheet 3, I'm having Shri, Satish, Ashok, and Ravindra. And here I have only Ravindra. Let me run this flow. Let me open this. Under the sheet 3, the Shri was replaced with Ravindra, which means whatever I have the number of rows, that will overwrite the existing data. In case if I have more rows in the existing sheet, then remaining rows will stay remain. Which means the number of rows we have in new data will override the existing data from for those rows, and the remaining row data will stay as it was. Here, guys, now, which means like if you have less number of rows with your new data, and if your file is having more data, then only the number of rows, whatever we have new, will be replaced with the new data, and the old data will remain same. So we need to just be cautious when we want to use write range, when we want to use append range, and when we want to overwrite the data, how many rows do you have, or is there any old data is lefting over? Clear about read range and write range and append range?
Yes, path, yes.
The difference between write range and append range. This can be your one of the question. Write range will write the data in Excel from the given cell if the data is already available, then it will override the existing data. Append range will write your data the next available empty row. Okay. Hope you all are clear, right? So let me do one thing. Let me delete this. Let me delete this too. And in the sheet one, let me insert an empty column and save it. I want to read this data and I want to append data into this sheet. So now I want to read the data from sheet 3 and I want to append the data into sheet 1. Let us see what will happen. Means I'm having an empty column at here. It is writing for me. So it is identifying from where your table is starting and from where your data is starting. Okay. So you can just try to do the experiments, whatever you want to do with all the Excel activities in a different way. Okay. Everyone clear up till this place? So we are going to cover this, how we are going to write the macros and how we can execute the macros and some data table related activities and few more interview questions related to the Excel, because we will be having a lot of interview questions on top of Excels in terms of